I was 24 years old when my brothers dragged me into the desert outside Kandahar, threw me into a shallow grave, and buried me alive for dishonoring our family. For 48 hours in September 2018, I lay trapped under Afghan soil with barely enough air to breathe, certain I would die. But Jesus Christ had other plans, and what happened next proved that his power to rescue is greater than any grave. My name is Layla Ahmadi. I was born in 1994 in Kandahar, Afghanistan, into a traditional Pashtun family. My father died when I was young, and my 3 older brothers became the family authorities, enforcing strict rules about honor, modesty, and obedience. In our culture, family honor depended heavily on daughters' behavior, and any perceived dishonor brought severe consequences. I grew up during Taliban rule and the chaos that followed. Education for girls was limited, opportunities were non-existent, and survival meant following rules without question. I learned to be invisible, obedient, and careful never to bring shame on my family. My world consisted of our home, female relatives' houses, and occasional supervised trips to the market. When I was 16, my older sister Amina was forced to marry a man known for violent temper. She was 18, he was 35, and the marriage was arranged for business connections. Within a year, Amina was dead, officially from accident, but family whispered that her husband had beaten her to death during one of his rages. No one reported it, no one investigated, and her husband faced no consequences. I was devastated by Amina's death but powerless to do anything. In our culture, women had no voice in such matters. Speaking against a husband, even a murderous one, would bring dishonor worse than his violence. I buried my grief and continued living the only life available to me. In 2017, when I was 23, my brothers arranged my marriage to the same man who had killed Amina. They explained that this marriage would resolve tensions between our families and restore relationships damaged by whispered accusations about Amina's death. The man was now 38, a widower looking for a new wife, and my brothers had agreed I would be that wife. I was horrified. They wanted me to marry my sister's killer, to sleep in the bed where she had suffered, to submit to the man who had murdered her. When I refused, my brothers were enraged. This marriage had been negotiated, agreements made, honor at stake. My refusal brought shame on our family and disrespected the arrangement they had carefully constructed. They gave me 1 week to reconsider. I used that week to plan escape, but before I could act, something unexpected happened. A neighbor woman who had heard about my situation secretly gave me a small Bible in Dari. She was a secret Christian and thought the book might help me. She warned me to hide it carefully and never tell anyone where it came from. I had never seen a Bible before and knew possessing one was extremely dangerous in Afghanistan. But desperate for any hope, I began reading it at night when my family slept. What I discovered in those pages would soon cost me everything but also save my soul in ways I never imagined. I read the Bible secretly over the following nights, hiding it carefully and reading by dim lamplight when everyone slept. I started with the Gospel of John and was immediately captivated by Jesus. Completely different from anything I had been taught about Isa in Islam. The Jesus I encountered in the Gospels claimed to be God himself, not just a prophet. He spoke with divine authority, performed miracles demonstrating power over nature and death, and offered salvation as gift rather than reward for religious performance. He treated women with dignity I had never seen, defending them, teaching them, valuing them as persons rather than property. One passage struck me powerfully: Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. When Lazarus's sister Martha said her brother would rise in the resurrection at the last day, Jesus responded, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die." This wasn't just promising future resurrection. Jesus was claiming to be the source of life itself, to have power over death. I thought about my sister Amina, dead at 19 from her husband's violence. Islam offered no comfort beyond vague promises about paradise if she had been good enough. But Jesus was claiming that he personally held power over death, that belief in him brought life even in the face of death. This was revolutionary. Over 2 weeks, I read the entire New Testament. I learned that Jesus died voluntarily to pay for humanity's sins, that he rose from the dead proving his power over death, that he offered eternal life freely to anyone who believed in him. The contrast with Islam was striking. Christianity offered assurance through Jesus's finished work, while Islam provided only uncertainty. I also noticed Jesus's treatment of women throughout the Gospels. He defended the woman caught in adultery from those who wanted to stone her. He spoke respectfully with the Samaritan woman despite cultural taboos. He appeared first to women after his resurrection, trusting them as witnesses. In a culture where women were treated as less than human, Jesus valued them as full persons worthy of dignity and respect. In late August 2018, alone in my room late one night, I made a decision that would change everything. I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I didn't fully understand all the theology, but I knew I had encountered truth and love that transcended anything Islam had offered. I prayed simply, asking Jesus to forgive my sins, to save me, and to help me navigate the impossible situation I faced. The peace that followed was profound but terrifying. I had just committed apostasy in one of the world's most dangerous countries for Christians. My family would view this as ultimate betrayal. If discovered, I could be killed, by authorities or by my own family defending their honor. I had to hide my conversion carefully while figuring out how to escape both the arranged marriage and Afghanistan. But I had no resources, no support system, and no clear path forward. All I had was a secret faith in Jesus and desperate prayers that he would somehow make a way. My conversion remained secret for 3 weeks. But in mid-September 2018, my youngest brother Rashid entered my room unexpectedly and found the Bible poorly hidden under my mattress. His shock turned immediately to rage. He called our other brothers, and within minutes, I faced all 3 of them demanding to know where I got a Christian book and if I had become an apostate. I could have lied. I could have claimed I was just curious, that I hadn't actually believed what I read. But standing before my brothers, I couldn't deny Jesus. I told them the truth. I had read the Bible, I believed Jesus was the Son of God, and I had surrendered my life to him. I could not marry Amina's killer, and I could not pretend to be Muslim anymore. The beating that followed was severe. They struck me repeatedly, calling me a whore, a traitor, a disgrace to the family. They said I had brought ultimate shame on the Ahmadi name, that my apostasy was worse than any other dishonor. They locked me in my room while they decided what to do with me. I could hear them arguing late into the night. Some wanted to turn me over to Taliban, who would execute me publicly for apostasy. Others wanted to handle it privately to avoid public shame. Eventually, they reached a decision that I would learn about the next morning. At dawn on September 18, 2018, my brothers came to my room. They bound my hands, covered my mouth with cloth to prevent screaming, and forced me into their vehicle. We drove into the desert outside Kandahar, far from any houses or roads. When we stopped, they dragged me out and showed me a shallow grave they had dug during the night, approximately 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. My oldest brother explained coldly that I had dishonored the family beyond redemption. Apostasy was unforgivable, and they could not allow me to live and spread my corruption. But they would not publicly execute me and bring more shame. Instead, they would bury me alive in the desert where no one would find me. I would die slowly, and they would report that I had run away, disappeared, perhaps been kidnapped. They threw me into the grave. I tried to scream through the cloth covering my mouth, tried to fight despite my bound hands, but I was helpless. I looked up and saw my brothers' faces, cold, determined, showing no mercy or regret. Then they began shoveling dirt over me. The dirt covered my legs, my torso, my chest. I struggled desperately, trying to avoid suffocation. They had positioned me so my face was partially turned, creating a small air pocket near my mouth. Whether this was intentional to prolong my suffering or accidental, I don't know. But it meant I wouldn't suffocate immediately. The last thing I saw was my oldest brother's expression as the final shovels of dirt covered my face. Then everything went dark. I was buried alive, trapped under Afghan soil, certain I would die slowly over the next hours or days. Complete darkness. The weight of earth pressing down on every part of my body. Barely enough air in the small pocket near my face to breathe. The suffocating heat of the Afghan desert, even underground. The terror of being buried alive with no hope of escape. This was my reality for the next 48 hours. The first hours were consumed by panic. I struggled against the dirt, trying to move, trying to free my hands, trying to create more breathing space. But the earth was too heavy, too compressed. Every movement used precious oxygen and accomplished nothing. I had to force myself to stop struggling, to breathe slowly and shallowly, to conserve the limited air available. The physical suffering was intense. The weight of the dirt made breathing difficult even when I wasn't panicking. My bound hands had lost circulation and hurt terribly. My body was cramped in an unnatural position. The heat was oppressive despite being underground. Thirst became overwhelming as hours passed with no water. But worse than physical suffering was the psychological torment. I was going to die slowly, alone, buried alive in a desert grave. My family had thrown me away like garbage, shown no mercy despite our blood relationship. I would never escape, never see daylight again, never have the chance to truly follow Jesus beyond my brief secret faith. As darkness and despair overwhelmed me, I began to pray. At first, my prayers were desperate pleas for rescue. Jesus, save me. Don't let me die here. Please send someone to dig me out. But as hours became a full day with no rescue, my prayers changed. I began asking Jesus to receive my spirit when I died, to forgive any sins I hadn't confessed, to help me die without losing faith. I thought about Jesus' death on the cross. He had suffered for hours, also unable to move, also struggling to breathe, also in terrible pain. But his suffering had purpose. He was dying for humanity's sins, making a way for people like me to be saved. My suffering had no such cosmic purpose, but somehow thinking about Jesus' death helped me endure my own dying. On the second day, my prayers became even simpler. I had no energy left for lengthy pleas. I just repeated Jesus' name over and over. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Sometimes it was prayer, sometimes just holding on to the only hope I had, sometimes just reminding myself that I wasn't completely alone even in this grave. I began losing consciousness periodically as oxygen levels dropped. During one of these times, I had what I can only describe as a vision or dream. I saw Jesus standing in brilliant light and he spoke to me, Layla, I did not bring you to myself only to let you die in this grave. I am the resurrection and the life. Trust me. Then the vision faded. I woke up, if I had actually been unconscious, with renewed conviction that I would not die in this grave. Somehow, impossibly, Jesus was going to rescue me. I had no idea how. There was no natural way for anyone to find me in the vast desert, no reason for anyone to be digging in this specific location. But I believed Jesus' promise. I was going to live. What happened next 48 hours after my burial was a miracle that no one, including me, could explain by natural means alone. On the morning of September 20, 2018, 48 hours after my burial, a nomadic shepherd was passing through the desert with his flock, miles from any normal grazing routes. Later he would say he felt inexplicably compelled to walk in that specific direction despite it making no practical sense. His sheep scattered slightly and one wandered to an area of disturbed earth. The sheep began pawing at the ground and the shepherd went to investigate. He noticed the earth had been recently disturbed, unusual in the empty desert. Something prompted him to dig, though he had no logical reason to do so. He began removing dirt with his hands and a stick. Within minutes, he uncovered fabric from my clothing. Shocked, he dug faster and soon exposed my face. I was unconscious, barely breathing, my skin pale and lips cracked from dehydration. He thought I was dead but checked for pulse and found a faint heartbeat. The shepherd immediately called for help on his mobile phone. Within an hour, a vehicle arrived with men from a nearby village. They carefully dug me out completely, discovering I was bound and had clearly been buried intentionally. They rushed me to a small medical clinic in the nearest town. I regained consciousness in the clinic several hours later, confused and disoriented. A doctor was providing 4 fluids and treating me for severe dehydration, exposure, and shock. When I became coherent enough to answer questions, I faced a dilemma. If I told the truth about my Christian conversion and my brother's attempted honor killing, I would likely be turned over to authorities who would finish what my brothers started. I told a partial truth. My brothers had tried to kill me over a marriage dispute and I needed protection. The clinic staff contacted a women's protection organization that operated secretly in the region, helping women escape honor violence. Within 24 hours I was moved to a safe house. Over the following weeks, the Christian underground network in Afghanistan learned about my situation through the woman who had given me the Bible. They connected me with international organizations helping persecuted believers escape. My survival story and Christian conversion made me a target, and staying in Afghanistan was impossible. In November 2018, I was evacuated from Afghanistan to a country offering asylum to persecuted Christians. The transition was difficult. I had no family, no belongings, no clear future. But I was alive when I should have been dead, and I had freedom to follow Jesus openly. Today I share my testimony around the world. I was buried alive for 48 hours as punishment for following Jesus Christ, and I survived because he promised he is the resurrection and the life. A shepherd who had no reason to be in that location, whose sheep wandered to that specific spot, who felt compelled to dig. These were not coincidences. They were Jesus orchestrating my rescue in ways only God could accomplish. My brothers meant to silence me by putting me in a grave. But Jesus proved that graves cannot hold those he chooses to raise up. I was buried alive, but Christ dug me out. And I will spend the rest of my life telling everyone that the God who rescued me from that Afghan desert grave is the same God who defeated death itself through resurrection. And he offers that same resurrection life to anyone who calls on his name.